Hi, welcome to Pyrography Made Easy. I'm Brenda. A few weeks ago, I had offered to help some artists with their pyrography projects as a thank you for reaching 15,000 subscribers. One of the artists was going to do a project on leather. I have been getting a lot of questions about leather lately, so I decided to make a separate video for the leather. So this video is intended to help the selected artist, Laura Lutzinger, I hope I pronounced your name right, and to address all the questions that I've been getting. I do want to point out that I have a video on tips for burning on leather. I will put a link to that video in the description below. It covers more stuff than what I'm going to be covering in this video. I'm going to start with some questions that pertain to burning on leather that's been chrome tanned and or burning on leather that's been dyed or finished. The questions all revolve around why can't I burn on these types of leather? Well, simply put, they contain chemicals and or heavy metals that can be very toxic if heated to the point of vaporization. Pyrography burners can get that hot. Now, I don't expect you to take my word for it, so I'm going to share some research that I've done on the subject, and that should better inform you. Before we go over the dangers of burning on chrome tanned and dyed leather, I'm going to cover the difference between vegetable tan and chrome tan leather. Then we'll get into the other subject. Veg tan leather is treated with vegetable matter high in tannins. Tannins are the same substance found in tea and wine. Treating leather this way produces light-colored hides that are great for tooling. This belt and this saddle are excellent examples of tooled leather. Chrome tan leather is made using chromium sulfate. This produces a very supple leather that is used for clothing and upholstery applications. Veg tan uses organic materials high in tannins, whereas chrome tan uses chemicals and the heavy metal chromium. It takes 2 to 4 weeks to cure veg tan hides, whereas chrome takes just 2 days. Veg tan leather is firm, but chromium tanned leather is very supple. One of the most common uses for veg tan leather is tooling. Chrome tanned is used for clothing and upholstery. Veg tan costs a lot more than chrome tan because of the length it takes to produce it. Dangers of chrome tanned leather. Per the safety data sheet by Fisher Scientific, chromium is also known as chromic sulfate, dichromium sulfate, sulfuric acid chromium salt. It's common to hear this last one referred to as chromium salts. I found a website, Nothing to Hide, that is maintained by World Leather. It has an article on chrome leather that I found very helpful. They state that tanners use the trivalent state of chromium. Elementary chromium, or CR0, is considered benign and very safe. Trivalent chromium, or CR3, is considered safe in most applications. As a result, it can be classified, labeled, or packaged as non-hazardous. It is the hexavalent or CR6 form of chromium that is of concern because it is very toxic and considered to be a carcinogenic, so it causes cancer, a mutagenic, it will mutate DNA or cause changes in the DNA, and reprotoxic, it damages the reproductive system. The article went on to say that CR6 is carcinogenic, but only by inhalation. At temperatures 800 degrees Celsius or higher, CR3 can be converted to CR6. So with normal usage of chromium leather, there isn't considered a risk. But what about pyrography? Let's make clear that 800 degrees Celsius is 1,472 degrees Fahrenheit. Colwood states that some of their burners can get up to 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Razor Tip claims that theirs can get up to 800 degrees Celsius. Now, I will admit, it is extremely unlikely that anybody is going to be burning on leather with their burner set that high. But the article continues on with some cautions about situations that can convert CR3 to CR6. So let's take a look at that. Ultraviolet light exposure, bleaching, and some cleaning procedures. Another risk group, cheap or low-quality fat liquiders, waxes, and oils. Now the big problem is you have no idea if any of these situations have occurred. And the risks so far cover just the tanning process. We haven't even talked about the dyes yet. So let's go over the risks for the dyes. I found a business website that makes dyes for an assortment of applications. Under their leather dyes, it says that most formulations are similar to lacquer. They consist of a dye or pigment, which can include things like chrome, zinc, cadmium. They may contain casein, which is a milk protein, nitrocellulose resin, that is a plastic, and a solvent. Solvents are items that dilute, dissolve, or disperse other compounds. Very descriptive. I did find this list of ingredients for Kiwi's black leather dye. The first ingredient, water carrier, a bit vague. Second ingredient, acrylic polymer film, that's plastic. The safety data sheet for diethylene glycol states do not breathe the vapors or aerosols from this chemical. The safety data sheet from Fisher Scientific says that it is a serious eye irritant. Pigment 77266 is called furnace black and is used in a variety of applications. It warns that you should avoid contact with the skin and inhalation of vapors. The safety data sheet for propylene glycol states that you need to keep it away from heat sources so that you don't release irritating gases and vapors. The safety data sheet on ammonium hydroxide states that it is very toxic. You need to avoid breathing mist, vapor, sprays. I found polyethylene glycol on Kim Blink's website. When I clicked on the SDS document, it took me to Sigma Aldrich, which said that this causes skin irritation, serious eye damage. Our last ingredient, benzisothiazole, is sodium salt. The chemical safety says it's corrosive, an irritant, and an environmental hazard. Well, I hope that gives you a better appreciation for the risk involved if you burn on chrome-tanned leather or leather that has been dyed. To me, it is not worth the health risk. Now, another question I have been getting a lot is, what temperature do I burn at? There are too many variables for the answer to have any real meaning. For example, how many burn hours does your pen tip have? If the pen tip is brand new and has 0 burn hours, it requires a higher heat than a pen tip that has many hours of burn time on it. So don't worry about the temperature that you're burning at. Instead, concentrate on the color output that you want to achieve. Now this brings me to the next group of questions that all revolve around, my pen tip is getting too hot and I can't get the temperature low enough to be able to burn leather with it. What can be done? Well, let's go over some considerations for picking out pen tips. Check the metal thickness of your pen tip. These are both J shaders. The one on the left is thicker because I didn't use fine grit sandpaper to clean it. I'm using the detail side of my burner and the heat is set at 3. The pin tip on the left has thinner metal and is producing much darker results than the one on the right. The number of burn hours your pen tip has also makes a difference. The pen tip on the left has hundreds of burn hours, whereas the one on the right has 0. The pen tip on the left with the long leads is Colwood's LE shader. The one on the right with the short leads is the S shader. Generally speaking, pen tips with long leads require more heat than those with short ones. I'm still using the detail side of the Colwood, and the S shader is set at 5.0, but the LE shader on the right is set at 6.5. For a fee, Colwood will professionally polish a pen tip. The pen tip on the left has been polished, and it is much smoother than the one on the right. Polished pen tips require a higher heat setting. I have the heat set at 5.5. The polished SHS tip on the left is producing a lighter colored burn than the unpolished J shader that is on the right. This is Colwood's SQ shader, and it is super clean. I'm using the heavy-duty side of my burner, and the heat is set to 3.0. I'm using a light hand pressure as I do for all of my burning. The pen tip glides easily across the surface of the wood, but it's not producing much color. I did some burning off screen to get the pen tip less clean. It is not what anyone would consider as dirty. Instead, some of the sheen has been removed. The color output is slightly darker now, even though the heat setting remains the same. I did some more off-screen burning, and the pen tip has lost most of its shiny, clean sheen. Notice how much darker the burn results are. The heat setting has not changed. It is still on 3.0. Even more off-screen burning has been done, and now there is visible carbon buildup on the pen tip. It is officially dirty and in need of a cleaning. Notice how the burn results have gotten lighter in color. The best advice I can give you is to try out different pen tips and see which one will work the best for the situation. I am burning on leather using the detail side of my burner, but look at the results. The pen tips produce different colors and needed different heat settings. If you still can't find a pen tip that works, all of them are still getting too hot for your burner, then it might be time to make an adjustment to your burner. I know that Colwood and Optima both have instructions on how you can make adjustments to your burner. I want to point out that I have not adjusted my burner, so while I am aware there is a way to do it, I know where the information is that would tell me how to do it. I haven't personally done this, so don't ask me questions about the process because I really don't know. So let's go over where you can find the information to adjust your burner. With Colwood, go to their website and click on the Classroom tab. Then scroll down until you reach the General Resources section. Now click on the Adjust the Trim Pot link. This opens a PDF and explains how to make adjustments to the burner. For Optima, go to their website, click on the Customer Support and FAQ tab, then scroll down till you get to number 6, Troubleshooting Burner Problems. This will open another screen that explains how to check for problems and how to change the power setting on your burner. As for other brands of burners like Razor Tip, go to the Customer Service section and click on any Q&A sections or instruction books and look through those. I can't promise you'll find anything, but that would be your best bet. If you still have problems, you can always contact the customer service for the brand of burner that you own. The next question I've been getting is whether or not you have to burnish leather before you burn on it. No, you don't. I like to burnish the leather because I like the texture change that it makes in the leather, but that also firms the leather, and that may not be a desirable characteristic. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what burnishing is, let's go over that. To burnish leather, I first saturate it with water. Then I use a burnishing tool and firmly rub over the leather. Normally I'd wet the entire piece, but as you can see, I've used this leather for some other things. Burnishing the leather makes the surface smoother and firmer to burn on, which I like. I think it makes it easier to burn and get finer details. The downside of burnishing is that it compresses the leather, making it stiffer to work with. Depending on the application, this may not be a desirable effect. The only thing I can tell you is try it, see what you think. Here's how the leather looked after it dried. I'm angling it around to try and show the texture difference. It's hard for the camera to pick that up. So I took a photo with my camera. The green circle marks the area where you can see normal leather texture. To the right of that circle, the leather is much smoother. You don't see that texture. I zoomed in for a closer look at the surface texture difference. The next group of questions I got pertain to how to get better results on leather. So I'm going to share with you some tips that will hopefully help improve your burn results. First, keep your pen tip in optimal position when burning along the edges. This means that the front edge of the shader is on the edge of the object. The body of the pen tip is angled over the area you are burning in. This position will help ensure that your edges stay crisp and clean. Make sure to rotate the leather as needed so that your pen tip stays in optimal position while working along the edges. Second, use a skew pen tip to create straighter, crisper looking lines. Just make sure to use a really light hand pressure with this type of pen tip because it will easily cut deep into the leather surface. I am using Colwood's MR pen tip. They also refer to it as the rounded heel pen tip. This is another situation where it is very important to rotate the leather as you're working. You want to always be pulling the pen tip down towards yourself. 3. To burn straight lines, lock your hand and wrist, then move your arm as one unit. Start at the top of the line, then slowly and steadily keep your speed at a constant rate. Move your arm down or back towards your body. Don't flex your wrist or fingers. This style of movement allows you to burn fairly long lines, much longer than what I'm demoing. And the lines are fairly straight for being free-handed. For better results, it helps to have a pencil guideline to burn over. 4. Keep your hand supported. My pinky finger is always in contact with the board, leather, whatever I'm burning on. This makes it easier to keep my hand steady and get more consistent burn results. 5. To widen a line, reburn over it with the pen tip angled. The pen tip should be angled towards the area you'll be burning in. This works better if you burn it in one continuous stroke, unlike what I did. During this reburn, I have the pen tip angled towards the left. That is the area that I will be burning in. 6. Avoid burning against the leather grain. Right now I am burning against the grain and the burn results are really choppy. It feels like the leather is resisting the pen tip. If this happens, rotate the leather and try burning in a different direction. 7. Use a light hand pressure when burning. This means the pen tip is barely touching the leather. You're not pushing down at all. Let it gently glide across the surface of the leather. This will give you nice, smooth burn results that have consistent color throughout the burn. Right now I'm using a heavy hand pressure. and the color is very inconsistent. It starts out darker than it ends. Well, I hope the tips will be helpful with burning on leather. This next section has to deal specifically with Laura's project. She is creating a Viking chessboard, and she had some questions about creating texture. I did some experimenting, so let me share with you what I discovered. First, I consulted with Michelle Parsons' book on leather pyrography. She states you need to use a thicker leather to create a tooled or textured effect on it. I'm using a ball pin tip to burn really dark dots over the dark triangular area on the leather. When I angle the leather, you can see the divots that were created by the pin tip. I'm going to repeat this experiment, but this time using thicker leather. In the first triangular area, I'm stippling over a dark burn using a standard Rider pin tip. With the second triangular shape, I started out stippling with the Rider pin tip. Then I burned over the area using a shader. The results are slightly different, but not hugely so. I would recommend trying this on scrap leather and see what you think. This Viking chessboard made out of leather looks like it was tooled, especially along the border. I'm trying to replicate that by using a shader and pressing it firmly along the edge of the diamond pattern. I'm burning dark and the heat is set pretty high. Well, that is for leather. Because of this, I'm not moving the pin tip while it is on the leather. Instead, I put it in place and then press firmly down and hold it there for a fraction of a second. Then I lift it up and place it in a new spot and repeat. I did this procedure to both the thin and thick leather that I have on hand. I think the thin leather I have is 2 ounces and the thicker leather 7 to 8 ounces. Then I used a small ball pin tip and burned some dots over it. This is after I had done a few dots with the large ball pin tip. I also burned along the edges of the diamonds just to see how the ball tip would do. It did great. It created really deep lines that were reminiscent of tooling. I think the main reason is the pin tip is small and I was burning at a higher heat, so the pin tip could really sink down into the leather. Here's a close-up of the two leathers. I do think that the thicker leather on the left was easier to create a more tooled look to the leather. Next, I created a couple of small burn patches. Then I did some tooling over the area. I purposely stamped over and around the burn patches. Afterwards, I burned over some of the tooling to see if the order something was done made a difference. I wanted to compare tooling over burning and burning over tooling. Be aware that the white ring forming around my burn marks is fatty spew, and that is a sign of a poorly cured hide. Here is a close-up of the leather, and you can decide what you think of it. Erasing. I've got several vertical lines on a piece of leather. I am trying to remove the burn marks that are to the left of the lines. My first method of erasing is to gently scrape over the marks using the edge of a sharp knife. Right now I am doing 2 small scrape patches. On the second patch, I carefully scrape in the opposite direction to try and smooth the leather back out. Basically, I'm trying to hide that I was scraping over it. Next up, I'm using an electric eraser equipped with an ink pen or sand eraser. The problem with this is hard to tell when you've gotten to the point you're doing damage to the leather surface. These are the standard refills for electric erasers. The blue is for drafting ink, and the white ones are for pencils. Neither one is good for pyrography. What I am using are refills made of the same type of eraser that I'm holding on the left, a sand or ballpoint pen ink eraser. Lastly, I'm using a sand or ink pen eraser, a manual version of the eraser. This worked fairly well, except on the really dark burn mark. I could not get it to remove the dark burn mark. Here's a close-up of the leather. You can still see a ghost of all of the burn marks. When I applied a dye over the top, all of the erase marks became very noticeable. I would not recommend using any of these methods to fix mistakes if you're going to be applying a dye. All of the other questions that I have gotten pertain to dyeing and/or finishing the leather. I am not qualified to answer those questions. I can burn on leather, but I am not a leather worker. What I am going to do is direct you to Weaver Leathercraft. They have a lot of videos about dyeing leather, finishing leather, the different types of dyes, the different types of finishes. Now, one thing that I will share with you is some experimenting that I did with Pro-Resist. Pro-Resist is a liquid you put on leather and it will resist the dyes. So let's take a look at that. I'm applying some Pro-Resist onto the leather using a damp sponge. I applied several layers and now I need to let it dry. After it was dry, I'm using EcoFlow's leather dye in Canyon Tan. I used a dauber that was well saturated with the dye and rubbed it over the leather. What was interesting is that when I wiped away the surplus dye, a good portion of it was removed from the area that had the Pro-Resist. I'm applying a second coat of dye, but this time I'm not going to wipe away the excess. Now I'm applying a black water stain to the other side of the burn area. What is the difference between a dye and a stain? I have no idea. After I applied the dye to the leather, I let it sit for about 10-15 minutes. Then I tried to wipe off the excess. Nothing changed. My guess is you probably need to wipe off the excess right after you apply it, but I don't know for sure. I let the leather sit overnight. The next day I applied Resolene. It is a top coat finish. When I wiped that over the leather, it picked up quite a bit of the dye from the Pro-Resist area. So I thought that was kind of interesting and something to be aware of that can happen. Resolene is water-based and it can be applied with a brush. I am painting on several layers to areas on the leather that I want to be lighter in color. I let it dry completely, and you can see it changes the color of the leather and adds a slight sheen. Then I applied dye over the area and let it dry. The dye doesn't look very good over the Pro-Resist areas. I tried to rub it off, but it didn't work. I did discover that you can use a damp paintbrush to remove some of the dried dye from the Pro-Resist treated areas on the leather. My last experiment with the Pro-Resist was to scrape over the leather like I was erasing something. Then I brushed the Pro-Resist over the top of that. Unfortunately, the area that was scraped is darker than the surrounding area. Here's how the leather looked after everything was dry. Well, that is it for this video. Now, my final words for leather is experiment. Take a piece of scrap leather and try out whatever idea you're thinking about doing. When I am experimenting, I learn more about pyrography than I ever do just following step-by-step instructions. And Laura, I'm sorry that this video took so long to get out, but I hope the wait was worthwhile and I hope that the information that I provided will be helpful for your project. Well, thank you everybody for watching my video, and I will see you soon.